Rutger Bregman did an absolutely amazing segment with Now This. I want you guys to take a look at this video and then we'll talk about it.
There are still people out there who call themselves moderates or centrists, and my message to them is just stop doing that. We're now at a time in American history and in world history where we simply cannot afford to be moderate. We can't afford to just be tinkering around the edges. If history teaches us one thing, it's always that change never starts in the center, but it always starts on the fringes. With people who are first dismissed as crazy and unreasonable and ridiculous. Every milestone of civilization, the end of slavery, democracy, equal rights for men and women, the welfare state, all these ideas were dismissed once as unreasonable and crazy until they happened. Think about the women who first argued for the women's right to vote. Were they the most powerful group in society? Did they have the most money? No, obviously not. But they did have an incredibly powerful idea. It's ideas that prevail. It's ideas worth fighting for. I'm not saying that you have to be an optimist. I'm just saying don't be a pessimist yet. 70% of Americans support Medicare for all. 75% of Americans want higher taxes on the rich. 81% of Americans is supportive of the Green New Deal. These ideas are utterly mainstream. They're supported by the vast majority of Americans. We need to really start thinking about these much bigger, more ambitious ideas, like obviously the Green New Deal, but also eradicating poverty, a universal basic income. Now there's a whole new generation that realizes we need this massive transformation of the economy, and that's not afraid anymore to be dismissed as ridiculous or unreasonable, but just goes ahead with these ideas that just a couple of years ago seemed crazy and out of touch with reality, but are now taken seriously. Whether we talk about rising inequality, whether we talk about climate change, we need much bolder policies, much bolder ideas, and we can do it because we've done so in the past. I think the main hurdle to any kind of political change is cynicism. Just this belief that nothing will ever change and, things have always been this way. It will never work out, blah, 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 blah. If people suffer from cynicism, I always advise them to study history, because history is the science of change. It shows you that things can always be different. How are we ever going to explain to our grandchildren that at this crucial time, granddaddy was a moderate back then? That's something to be ashamed of, I think. I don't want to make the opposition between the left and the right. This is about the people versus the elites. That's what it's about. It's about plutocracy versus democracy. So if you're young and if you want to change the world, don't be afraid to be dismissed as unreasonable sometimes, because that's how progress starts. If you have a good idea, then just keep pushing for it.
That guy's a friggin' genius. I absolutely love Rutger Bregman. If you're not familiar with who Rutger Bregman is, if that was just a random guy to you, let me explain to you who he is because it's pretty relevant. He's famous for a few things. He wrote Utopia for Realists, which is an awesome book. I highly recommend it. Basically, it talks about how to advocate for progressive policies that many people would see as pie in the skies. So like, for example, universal healthcare, universal basic income, but even further than that, we can advocate for things like 15-hour work weeks and stuff like that. Make sure you take a look at that book. It's a great book. He also went to Europe and called out a bunch of billionaires at this conference to their faces. It was absolutely awesome. And then he went on Tucker Carlson's show. He basically called out Tucker Carlson for being a millionaire paid by billionaires. Tucker Carlson started cussing him out, and then the show never aired. So Rutger Bregman has a pretty interesting, I think he's a professor too. I could be wrong about that. But anyways, nonetheless, he's absolutely brilliant. And I think that he's gaining a lot of attention for himself because of that interview that he had with Tucker Carlson specifically. And I absolutely love it because what he is saying is pure gold. It's so hard to provide commentary on this guy because there's so little I can add. The only thing I can add to what he said would be extremist policies that I could suggest. And I think we need to consider doing this because he's absolutely right. Like, change happens on the fringes. We need to be advocating for crazy ideas and then having discussions around them. That's what we need to be doing. And unfortunately, it's the Republicans and it's the centrists that are not doing that. They're simply holding back, saying the problems will fix themselves. But that simultaneously, they'll say, according to Pew Research polls, that the government is not working the way it should be. I think it was something like 98% of Americans in the last Pew Research poll that came out a few days ago. I did a video on it. 98% of Americans are worried that their politicians will not tackle big issues. That's incredibly scary. But yet simultaneously we have all these centrists. And so it's important to understand that we need to start picking our platforms. We need to start really demanding radical change. And understand this, there is a polarization in the US, and there are so many candidates that are coming out and saying, you know, this is dangerous. We're being more polarized. We're getting more divided. I actually disagree with that. I am in favor of political polarization because, like Rutger Bregman said, it's the centrists that really mess things up. Consider Ronald Reagan, for example. Ronald Reagan had some crazy ideas. Now, do I support Ronald Reagan's policies? No, I don't like trickle-down economics. But did Ronald Reagan know that trickle-down economics was going to work? He didn't, honestly. Like, there was not a lot of, there weren't any presidents to suggest this sort of economic philosophy. And so understand that when Ronald Reagan initially ran, especially the second time, I believe, he completely crushed it. He completely crushed it. And so understand there's a difference between suggesting that Ronald Reagan was a good president and suggesting that the underlying philosophy behind radical change was good with Ronald Reagan. I support Ronald Reagan's extreme ideas. The fact that he was trying new things. I don't like a lot of the things that he did, but nonetheless, he did something way better than, for example, Bill Clinton ever did, which basically was a giant nothing burger. George Bush, all he did was went to war without Congress's approval. Did he do anything that was actually relevant to you? No, absolutely not. Obama, what did he do? Affordable Care Act, which was an incrementalist policy. It literally didn't change anything. It's not like every day, we all woke up and all of a sudden everything was different, right? If we had Medicare for all, we would wake up and say, everything is different. I can go to a hospital and get treated and I don't have to worry about filing for bankruptcy the next day, right? Radical ideas are good. And I'm saying they're good despite which side you're on. It doesn't, or in light of what side you're on. Like, it doesn't matter. Polarization is 100% good. Now, there's also things, there's a couple other things I want to advocate for on this segment. I think that we need to start, as progressives, we need to start moving more left. Like, this is something that I don't like about modern progressives, including AOC, TYT, Secular Talk even. For so long, for like 10 years now, progressives have been stuck behind the typical progressive platform that Bernie Sanders stands on. And when you understand these progressives and their platforms internationally, they are international centrists. So they're advocating for policies like Kyle Klinsky is advocating, for example, for gun control. Does he advocate for eliminating guns entirely? No, despite the fact that, internationally speaking, eliminating guns entirely is a centrist idea. It's not even, a lot of Republicans would advocate for such a policy. So, like, we need to be moving more left, even though our political system isn't following us. And I'll explain why that is in a second. But even though we're running behind a little bit in terms of our government's running behind us, I should say, we should not stop and wait up for them. We need to keep moving further to the left. That's why you see a lot of Democrats, or progressives, I should say, advocating now for universal basic income. Andrew Yang, I just did a segment on him. He's running as a president with universal basic income as one of the top 3 priorities that he's running off of. Whereas Bernie Sanders is not necessarily running off of universal basic income as a primary goal. He's running off of universal Medicare for all, which Andrew Yang, granted, is also running on. Tulsi Gabbard, you have Kirsten Gillibrand a little bit, kind of, sort of. But understand this, like, we can't just wait for them to get their stuff rolling, right? AOC, she's advocating for the Green New Deal. That was like a year ago. She said we have this is going to be a policy that is going to last 10 years or whatever. I would go, if I were AOC, I would go further to the left and say, listen, Republicans, it is your fault that now we have only 9 years left. So I am not changing the Green New Deal in any way. I'm still advocating for the Green New Deal, but now the time period has shrunk because you didn't do anything. And so the idea is, because the Republicans are trying to delay the government from implementing policy, productive policy like the Green New Deal, you move the Green New Deal even further to the left so that eventually they'll catch up. Eventually they'll get there. Eventually we'll get the Green New Deal. But do not stop and wait up for Republicans in Congress. And unfortunately, so many progressives have done that. So let me give you guys some policy positions that I advocate for, that I think are radical, but a lot of other progressives do not support this. And this is my way of saying we need to move more left. So number one, I am in favor of eliminating guns entirely. Harvard study, you can take a look at my last video I did on this. Harvard study has, Harvard did a giant literature review, and proved, empirically speaking, that more guns equal more homicides. That was their conclusion of a giant literature review. Huge amount of subsynthesis, huge number of researchers behind this. So, eliminate guns. I don't want to be an incrementalist and say, oh yeah, let's start by banning, limiting the size of our magazines and banning bump stocks and stuff like that. That's something that's like a TYT-esque philosophy. That's a secular talk-esque philosophy. David Pakman-esque philosophy. No, eliminate all guns. Next, 15-hour work weeks. Something that Rutger Bregman himself, this guy who is currently being blocked right now. This guy is advocating for 15-hour work weeks. Read Utopia for a Realist, and you'll understand that this guy is literally suggesting to Americans, Europeans are doing this. Europeans are moving more and more and more and more to the left, and we're just staying still. Like, Europeans are already considering 15-hour work week mandates. Let's join them. Let's catch up. Let's not stay like 10 years behind. Let's catch all the way up and maybe go further than that. So I'm advocating for 15-hour work weeks. Open borders. Rutger Bregman. Once again, this guy has advocated for open borders. A lot of progressives hesitate on something like that because they feel like there's some sort of problem with border security. Immigrants commit less crimes than Americans, and they contribute to the economy. That is empirically and objectively true. Right? I can prove that. I can back that up with research, and I've done so on many of my videos. So understand that immigrants contribute to society. They make this country better. Multiculturalism in general makes this country a better place to live. And so, open borders. And I know a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, open borders, no, he just said the word. And Trump, I guarantee you, if Trump heard that, they'd be like, these radical Democrats, radical extremist socialists, right? I'm just advocating for social justice. That's all I'm advocating for. I don't think that someone should die in Mexico because they can't cross a wall. That's all I'm saying. I think that should be a human right to be able to go into any country and request amnesty regardless of what your reason is. I don't care. Oh, because, it's hard to get a job in Mexico. Good enough reason. I like it. Get in. You're welcome. My mom lives here. I want to live here too. Okay, go ahead. All yours. You're a U.S. citizen. Like, I think there should be very, very limited cases where we would prevent someone from getting U.S. citizenship here. And I think the process should be much more simple. Next, direct democracy. We have to have a direct democracy. So, in my view, I think that there should be a set number of issues that we can consistently vote on. We don't have to wait 4 years. We can vote on them live. And here's what I advocated for. I did a video on this, and this is where I actually become more progressive than Kyle Kulinski, who just advocates for 5 issues every 4 years. This is the system that I would like, and this is a radical idea. But again, this is what Rutger Bregman is calling for, and this is something that every progressive should be understandingly listening to. So listen to this. Direct democracy. Here's how it works. You have an internet profile. that is issued by the government, and you can log in with your social security number. Now, already a lot of libertarians will say, oh, we need limited government and everything, someone can hack or whatever. No, shut up. We have online DMVs and MVDs or whatever. Half of your stuff is on Google, has all your information anyways, and you're probably cool with it. So don't give me that bull crap. So you have this online profile and you have access to a bunch of popular issues. What's defined as popular? Well, you just need to gather maybe a certain number of signatures, and everyone can vote on whatever policies they want. And if any policy gathers together 60% on a certain side, then immediately that policy passes. It bypasses all of the legislative branch, immediate federal law. So for example, universal health care has 72% support, I think it was. I can't remember, whatever the case, it's over 70% support. That law would immediately pass in Congress. Don't need a vote. I don't need representatives. I don't need people to say what I say when I can say it myself. So immediately it passes. Now, the reason I say 60% and not 50% is because when a vote gets close to 50%, it might go back and forth. And that would mean that the legislative branch or the executive branch would have to execute opposing policies nonstop. They would have to look every single day to see what is it now. But if you make it 60% on one side, it has to be a 60% majority on either side. You have a 20% leeway between both sides, where it takes some time, maybe weeks or months or even years or decades or forever, for you to switch on to a different side with popular vote. That is an awesome system. That would immediately pass a bunch of policies, and then people could start thinking of really good ideas. And the idea is, let's say you come out with a radical idea that totally sucks. Like, for example, maybe people want tax cuts for the rich at some point in time. You try it. People realize this does not work. This is not a good idea. Never mind. It loses popularity instantly, and boom, tax cuts for the rich gone. This kind of thing would have been really good for Britain. Britain uses direct democracy in a lot of their propositions. For example, Brexit. Brexit was voted on by popular vote. People wanted to leave the EU in Britain. But understand this: the UK, confounding UK and Britain here. Sorry, the UK left Britain, and now people are in this limbo where they're starting to realize maybe we shouldn't leave the EU, and everyone's starting to flip their opinions. And now a majority of members of the UK are advocating against a Brexit. And so it'd be really convenient if they could do another referendum, but they're saying, no, we shouldn't do a referendum because of, political calculation purposes and logistical purposes. And I hate that. I think that's not a true direct democracy. So I think we need a complete direct democracy. I think the executive branch also needs to be, instead of every 4 years, same kind of system. We vote on a president, and the president switches immediately the second we garner 60% on the other side of a single candidate. Stuff like this, guys. Stuff like this. This is what we need. But the idea is, if you listen to any of these ideas and you said, those are extremists, I don't like you, you are advocating for a moderate philosophy. You should look at those and say, those are really interesting ideas. I should consider researching them. I should consider looking into these things. And it's the moderates who don't. And because they don't, we're sitting here with nothing being passed. And they keep voting in people like Joe Manchin, Dianne Feinstein, Cory Booker, these nothing burgers that don't do anything other than talk about how Trump sucks. And then they flip on whatever issue they need to, just so that they can really emphasize that Trump sucks. So that's my addition. Not a lot of commentary that's in addition to Rutger Bregman. It's just essentially extending his philosophy. But the purpose of this segment is to understand that we need Rutger Bregman's philosophy, that it's okay to imagine things that seem like pie in the skies. If we keep fighting for them, it works. That's exactly what Bernie Sanders did with climate change, Medicare for all, and a bunch of other different policies. They seemed unpopular 5 years ago, but now they're incredibly overwhelmingly popular. It's because of Bernie Sanders that we're here now. And I think it should be because of people like me, people like even TYT, Kyle Klinsky. We need to start moving more to the left. And we need to keep implementing amazing policies that Americans want.